He noticed them while folding laundry, small fading marks where innocence should have been untouched. In the quiet that followed, a single thought settled like dust. Love does not always protect in time. What happens next is not loud, only careful and earned. Stay a while. Let the silence tell you why. The evening followed its usual shape. Shoes by the door. A small jacket folded over the chair. The hum of the dryer filling the narrow apartment with warmth that did not quite reach the corners. He moved through it all without thinking, guided by habit more than intention, letting the hours pass the way they always did, carefully, quietly, without room for error. He folded the laundry at the small table by the window. The light outside had dimmed into blue, the kind that made everything feel slightly unfinished. Socks paired, shirts smooth. He worked slowly, not because there was time to spare, but because slowness had become his way of keeping things intact. One of the smaller shirts slipped from his hands. He caught it before it touched the floor. Instinctive, precise. As he lifted it again, he noticed the faint discoloration along the fabric's inside edge. Not dirt, not shadow, something else. He turned the shirt over, then back, then held it closer to the light. The marks were small, yellowed at the edges, already fading. His breath caught, shallow and unnoticed, like a pause in a sentence no one else could hear. He set the shirt down and reached for the next piece of clothing, hoping without admitting it that the moment would dissolve if he did not look too closely. But the next garment confirmed what the first had suggested. And the next. Bruises. Light, but unmistakable. He sat down without realizing he had chosen to. The chairs scraped softly against the floor. The dryer continued its steady rhythm, indifferent, unchanging. His hands rested flat against the table, fingers spread as if to hold something in place. There were explanations, of course. Children fell. They ran into corners, tumbled on playgrounds, collided with the world in ways adults had long learned to avoid. He knew this. He had told himself this many times before, whenever a knee came home scraped or an elbow bloomed purple. But these marks did not belong to accident. They were too careful, too contained. From the other room came the sound of water running, then stopping. A pause. The faint clatter of a cup being set beside the sink. His son's footsteps followed, light and deliberate, each one measured as if listening for permission to exist. He did not look up right away. The boy hovered near the doorway, clutching his toothbrush with both hands. His hair was still damp, the ends curling against his neck. He waited. He always waited. All done? The man asked, keeping his voice even, familiar. The boy nodded. Yes. No rush. No bounce. Just compliance. Go on then, he said. I'll be there in a minute. The boy hesitated, then turned toward the bedroom. His shoulders were slightly hunched, as if making himself smaller helped him pass unnoticed. The man watched him go, noticing how carefully he navigated the narrow hall, how he avoided brushing against the doorframe he had bumped into countless times before. When the bedroom door closed, the apartment felt suddenly too quiet. The dryer clicked off, leaving a hollow stillness behind. He stood and gathered the laundry into a neat pile, though there was no urgency now, no need for order. He carried it into the bedroom and set it down without comment. The bedtime routine unfolded as it always did. Pajamas pulled on, teeth checked, the blanket smoothed over small legs. He read from the same book they had been reading for weeks, his voice steady, unhurried. He did not ask questions. He did not touch where the bruises would be. The boy listened, eyes open but distant, as if the story were happening somewhere far away. When the last page was finished, he turned onto his side without being prompted. "Good night," the man said. "Good night," came the soft reply. He lingered in the doorway longer than usual, watching the slow rise and fall of his son's back. There was nothing visibly wrong now. No signs of pain. No tears. Just sleep, claimed quickly, like a place of escape. Back in the kitchen, he stood at the sink and let the water run longer than necessary. His reflection stared back at him from the darkened window, tired, older than he remembered becoming. He pressed his palms against the counter and leaned forward. A thought surfaced then, uninvited and heavy. "I failed you." It did not come with explanation or defense. It settled quietly, like something that had been waiting its turn. He shut off the water and stood there, unmoving, as the apartment cooled around him. Whatever had happened, whatever he had missed, could no longer be ignored. Love, he realized, was not the same as vigilance. Good intentions did not bruise-proof a child. That night he did not sleep. He listened instead to the building settling, to the distant traffic, to the soft, steady breathing from the other room, and promised nothing aloud. But something had already shifted. Morning arrived without resolution. It never did. He woke before the alarm, the way he always did, lying still for a moment as if remaining quiet might preserve the fragile calm of the apartment. The ceiling above him was faintly stained, a thin crack running from one corner to the other. He had meant to fix it for years. He rose, dressed, and moved through the kitchen with practiced care. Breakfast was simple toast, sliced fruit, a glass of milk set exactly where small hands could reach it. He listened for movement from the bedroom, attuned now to every sound. When his son appeared, already dressed, backpack clutched tight, something in the way he stood felt altered. Not broken, just guarded. "Morning," he said. "Morning," the boy replied, eyes fixed on the table. They ate mostly in silence. He watched his son more than the food, noticing how carefully he chewed, how he kept his elbows tucked in close. When it was time to leave, the boy slipped on his jacket without help. He did not complain about the cold. The school sat 3 blocks away, a low brick building softened by years of weather and noise. Parents gathered in loose clusters by the entrance, voices overlapping, laughter breaking through the early chill. He slowed his steps as they approached, his son instinctively staying close. Inside, the hallway smelled faintly of cleaner and crayons. The teacher greeted them with a smile that faltered briefly when she looked down at the boy. Not long enough to be obvious, long enough to be noticed. "There's been a request," she said gently, turning to him. "From administration. They'd like to speak with you this morning." His stomach tightened, but he nodded. He knelt to his son's level, straightened the strap of his backpack. "I'll be right here," he said. "Okay." The boy nodded once, then followed the teacher without looking back. The office was quiet, brighter than necessary. A woman stood near the window, her back to the door. She was tall, composed, dressed simply but with an unmistakable precision. Not formal, intentional. When she turned, her expression held no surprise, only attention. "Thank you for coming," she said. Her voice was calm, measured. "Please, sit." He did, hands folded in his lap. He waited for accusation, for concern wrapped in policy language. It did not come. "I oversee several community programs connected to the school," she continued. "Today, I'm here because your son was noticed." "Noticed," he repeated. She nodded. "He's quiet, observant. Children like that often go unseen, but not always." There was no judgment in her tone, just fact. She spoke of procedure, of care, of ensuring safety without alarm. She asked questions, but none felt like traps. She watched him closely, not for guilt, but for truth. He answered plainly. He did not defend himself beyond what was necessary. When she mentioned the bruises, he did not look away. "I didn't see them soon enough," he said. Her gaze softened, just slightly. "Seeing now matters," she replied. The meeting ended without resolution, but not without direction. Resources offered, support mentioned, not imposed. When he stood to leave, she extended her hand. "If you need assistance navigating what comes next," she said, "my office is available." He hesitated, then shook her hand. Her grip was steady, reassuring without promise. Outside, the day had warmed. Parents dispersed. The sidewalk felt longer on the walk home. That evening, as he waited outside the classroom at dismissal, he saw her again. She stood apart from the crowd, observing rather than participating. When his son emerged, her attention shifted immediately to him. She knelt to the boy's level, spoke briefly, quietly. The boy nodded, then glanced back at his father, something unreadable crossing his face. She rose and met his eyes. "He's brave," she said simply. in ways adults forget to notice. He did not know how to respond. She inclined her head, then stepped back, already receding into the ordinary motion of the world. Walking home, his son held his hand without being asked. The grip was firm, intentional. He adjusted his stride to match. Behind them, the city moved on. Ahead, nothing was certain, but someone had seen them. The space she offered did not announce itself. There were no grand entrances, no gestures meant to impress. It was simply there, quiet, orderly, waiting to be used. It came 2 days later, after a short phone call that caught him unprepared. Her voice was the same as before, calm, unhurried, as though time bent slightly around her. "There's a place you could use," she said. "Temporarily. It might make the next few weeks easier." He hesitated long enough that she noticed. "It's not charity," she added. "It's structure. Sometimes that's all people need." He agreed because he could not think of a reason not to, because his son was sitting at the table across from him, drawing in careful lines, pausing often to erase what did not feel right. The building was modest from the outside, brick softened by ivy, windows clean but unadorned. Inside, the air smelled faintly of soap and something warm bread, perhaps, or coffee. She led them down a short hallway and opened a door. The room was small but complete. A bed with a quilt folded neatly at the foot, a couch that had been used but cared for, a low shelf already stocked with children's books. Nothing new, nothing excessive. His son stepped inside first, eyes moving slowly, taking inventory. He touched the edge of the shelf, then the arm of the couch. He did not ask questions. "There's a kitchen down the hall," she said. "Dinner's informal. People eat when they're ready." People, not clients, not cases. She left them there without instruction, without expectation. The door closed softly behind her. That first evening they sat at the small table near the window and ate soup that tasted like someone had made it with patience. His son ate steadily, shoulders easing as the minutes passed. When he finished, he asked for more. It felt like permission. Over the next days, routines formed quietly. Mornings began with toast and fruit laid out communally. Afternoons passed with homework done at the long table near the window. Evenings settled into shared meals, conversation optional. She appeared often, but never intrusively. Sometimes she brought a stack of mail or a folder tucked under her arm. Sometimes she carried nothing at all. She always greeted the boy first. "How was your day?" she asked him, crouching slightly to meet his eye. "Okay," he said, then, after a pause, "Good." She smiled at that. "Not broadly, just enough." The father watched from a careful distance, noting how she never touched without invitation, never filled silences that did not need filling. When she spoke to him, it was about practical things, schedules, transportation, the small logistics that made life feel manageable again. One evening, she stayed for dinner. The three of them sat together, bowls warming their hands. The conversation was sparse but comfortable. When the boy spilled water, she handed him a cloth without comment. He wiped it up himself. Afterward, she helped clear the table. The father started to protest, then stopped. He let her carry plates to the sink. It felt strange, allowing someone else into the shape of their lives. Later, as his son read on the couch, she stood beside him in the kitchen. "He's settling," she said quietly. He nodded. "He likes it here." She glanced toward the living area. "It's meant to be liked." That night, his son fell asleep quickly. The father sat beside the bed longer than necessary, listening to the evenness of his breathing. The room felt safe in a way he had forgotten was possible. In the days that followed, the boy began to speak more. Small observations, questions about the books on the shelf, comments about the food. He laughed once softly, surprised by the sound. The father felt something loosen in his chest. One afternoon, he found his son sitting with her in the common room, a puzzle spread out between them. They worked in silence, pieces moving steadily into place. When the boy looked up and saw his father, he smiled. Not quickly, not cautiously, just smiled. The father leaned against the doorframe and watched. He did not interrupt. He did not feel the need to. For the first time in weeks, The world did not feel like it was waiting to break them. Time did not announce itself as change. It moved away it always did, quietly, through repetition. Morning settled into a rhythm that required less effort each day. His son began waking before him, padding softly into the kitchen to pour cereal without spilling. Sometimes he waited at the table, sometimes he did not. Either way, there was no longer the tight vigilance in his posture. He hummed occasionally, barely audible, as if testing whether sound was still allowed. The woman noticed everything without remarking on most of it. She observed the way the boy lingered less at doorways, how he took up more space on the couch, how he argued mildly about which book to read at night. These were not milestones to celebrate aloud. They were signs of safety, and she treated them as such. She and the father spoke more now, though rarely about anything that felt important on the surface. Logistics filled the space between them, pickup times, schedules, meals that needed planning. When conversation drifted elsewhere, it did so gently. One evening, while the boy worked through his homework at the long table, she stood beside the father near the window. "He concentrates like you," she said. He glanced at his son. "He always has." A pause followed. Not uncomfortable, just unoccupied. "He didn't ask why I do this," she added. He considered that. "I figured if it mattered, you'd tell me." Her lips curved slightly, something close to amusement. "That's usually how I decide whether to stay." She did stay. Not late, not early, just present. Sometimes she brought documents and worked nearby, the quiet scratch of pen against paper blending with the small sounds of domestic life. Other times, she joined them for dinner and left afterward, her absence never abrupt. The boy began to anticipate her arrival. Not eagerly, not anxiously, just with expectation, like weather that could be trusted. One afternoon, she brought a small wooden box and set it on the shelf. "For puzzles," she told the boy. He opened it carefully, as if the contents might spill secrets instead of pieces. He worked on it over several days, inviting her to sit with him when she passed by. She always did, lowering herself to the floor without hesitation. The father watched these moments from a distance that felt respectful, though he could not have explained why. There was no jealousy in him, only relief. She did not replace him. She reinforced what was already there. One night, after the boy had gone to bed, the three of them having shared a meal and little else, she lingered in the kitchen. "You don't have to stay awake every night," she said quietly. He did not pretend not to understand. "I know, but you do." "Yes." She nodded, accepting that without commentary. After a moment, she reached for a mug and poured tea for them both. They stood side by side, steam rising between them, not quite touching. Outside, the city lights blurred against the window. "He trusts you," she said finally. He looked down at his hands. "I'm trying to deserve it." She did not respond right away. When she did, her voice was steady. "You already are. You're just learning to see it." The words stayed with him long after she left that night. Later, as he checked on his son, adjusting the blanket where it had slipped, the boy stirred and murmured something unintelligible. He did not wake. His face remained relaxed, unguarded. The father sat on the edge of the bed longer than usual, listening, breathing in the ordinary quiet of the room. The fear that had once filled every corner had begun to recede, not erased, but softened. In the hallway, the light from the kitchen spilled faintly under the door. Someone else had turned it off before leaving. The apartment this borrowed, careful space held them without asking for anything in return. And something, unnamed and unrequested, continued to grow. The change became most visible in the smallest interruptions. The boy began leaving his shoes wherever he took them off, instead of lining them carefully by the door. He forgot to push his chair in after meals. Once he laughed too loudly at something on the radio and startled himself, clapping a hand over his mouth as if expecting correction. None came. He laughed again, softer this time, testing the sound the way one tested thin ice. The father noticed each of these moments and said nothing. He learned, slowly, that safety did not require constant instruction. Sometimes it required restraint. The woman continued to arrive and depart without ceremony. She did not announce her schedule, and he did not ask for it. She seemed to know when to stay and when to step away, a sense honed long before them. When she was present, the atmosphere shifted subtly, like furniture rearranged just enough to make a room easier to move through. One evening, the boy asked if she would read with him. She looked at the father first, not for permission, but for acknowledgement. He nodded once. They sat together on the couch, the book open between them. Her voice was calm, even, unadorned. She did not perform the story. She respected it. The boy leaned into her shoulder without realizing he had done so. She did not stiffen. She did not respond. She simply remained. The father watched from the kitchen, his hands stilling around the mug he held. The sight did not wound him. It steadied him. Later that night, after the boy had fallen asleep, she stood by the door, gathering her things. "He didn't ask where you go," the father said quietly. She paused. "No. He used to ask. About everyone." She considered that. "He knows where I am when I'm not here." "Do you?" he asked, then immediately regretted the question. She met his gaze, unoffended. "Yes." They stood in the narrow entryway, the space between them measured but not defensive. He realized then how rarely she filled silence with reassurance. She trusted it to hold its shape. "There are things I can offer," she said after a moment. "Resources, time, stability." He waited. "But I can't replace you," she continued. "And I wouldn't try." "I know," he said. And he did. A few days later, the boy came home from school with a small cut on his finger. Nothing serious. Barely a mark. He held it up, waiting. The father reached for the first aid kit. Before he could open it, the boy said, "It doesn't hurt." "I know," the father replied. "Still needs cleaning." The boy watched closely as the cut was washed and covered. He did not flinch. When it was done, he smiled. "Okay," he said, and ran off. The woman had witnessed the exchange from the doorway. She did not comment. Later, as she helped prepare dinner, she spoke quietly. "He tells the truth when he isn't afraid of the answer." The father nodded. "He's learning when it's safe to." She washed her hands, dried them carefully. "So are you." The days continued. Not perfect, not untouched by memory, but held. One afternoon, the father returned early and found the boy asleep on the couch, his head resting against her side. A blanket covered them both. She was awake, eyes open, still. She glanced up at him but did not move. "Sorry," he whispered. She shook her head. "Don't be." He stood there for a long moment, watching the steady rise and fall of his son's chest, the way his fingers curled loosely into the fabric of her sleeve. No tension, no fear. When the boy stirred and woke, he did not pull away. He simply stretched, yawned, and sat up. "Hi," he said to his father. "Hi," the father replied. The woman smiled just slightly, then reached for her tea as if nothing remarkable had happened. But the father knew better. Something essential had taken root, not through declaration or intention, but through quiet consistency, through being there when nothing was asked, through staying. And none of them had named it. The first sign of trouble arrived without spectacle. It came as a letter folded once too many times, its edges worn before it was opened. He found it among the rest of the mail one evening, slipped between a grocery receipt and a flyer for a local event he would not attend. He recognized the seal immediately. His hand hesitated before breaking it, as if the contents might change if left untouched. Inside, the language was careful, polite, procedural, a reminder that oversight was ongoing, that evaluations were not accusations, but safeguards, that children required protection even when love was present. He read it twice, then folded it again and set it aside. Dinner that night passed quietly. His son ate without complaint, told a small story about school that ended nowhere in particular. The woman listened, nodding at the right moments, her attention steady. Nothing in her manner suggested she had seen the letter or sensed its weight. After the boy went to bed, the father returned to the kitchen and picked it up again. He did not know what he had expected, relief perhaps, or clarity. Instead, the old fear resurfaced, familiar and sharp. He imagined disruption, questions asked too loudly, stability unraveling under scrutiny. He imagined his son retreating again, drawing inward, learning once more to be small. The woman found him there, seated at the table, the letter unopened beside him for the second time. "You don't usually sit like that," she said gently. He did not look up. "There's a review coming." She took the chair across from him without invitation. "Tell me what that means." He explained in plain terms. No embellishment. No appeal. When he finished, she sat back slightly, considering. "And what do you think you should do?" she asked. He exhaled slowly. "I think I should leave." The words surprised him with their ease. They had been forming for days, perhaps longer. She did not interrupt. "I don't want him caught in something that's complicated," he continued. "You have responsibilities, visibility. This place what you built, it's too much to risk." Her expression remained composed, but something in her eyes sharpened. "You think leaving would protect him?" "Yes." "And you think staying would endanger him?" He nodded. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, carefully. "Protection isn't always distance." He looked up then, meeting her gaze. "Sometimes it is." She did not argue. She did not persuade. Instead, she stood and walked to the window, resting her hands lightly on the sill. "I won't stop you," she said, "and I won't pretend your concern isn't valid." The absence of resistance unsettled him more than opposition would have. "But," she continued, still facing outward, "I need to be clear about one thing." He waited. "If you leave because you believe he is unsafe here," she said, "you are wrong. If you leave because you are afraid of what might be taken from you, that's something only you can decide." She turned back to him. "I won't hold either choice against you." That night, sleep did not come easily. He lay awake, listening to the familiar sounds of the building, the soft breezing from the next room. He watched the ceiling until the crack blurred into shadow. In the morning, his son noticed the packed bag by the door. "Are we going somewhere?" the boy asked, voice neutral but alert. "Maybe," the father said. The boy considered that. "For how long?" "I don't know yet." The boy nodded, then went to put on his shoes. Halfway through, he stopped. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked, not looking up. The question landed quietly, devastating in its simplicity. "No," the father said immediately. He knelt, placing his hands gently on the boy's shoulders. "No, you didn't do anything wrong." The boy studied his face, searching. "Then why are we leaving?" The father had no answer that would not injure. Later that afternoon, the woman arrived earlier than usual. She took in the sight of the bag without comment. The boy went to his room. The adults remained in the kitchen, the space between them taut with unspoken understanding. "I won't ask you to stay," she said softly. "I know. I won't promise that this will be easy. I know." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "But I need you to know something else." He looked at her. "I am not afraid of responsibility," she said, "and I will not step away from a child because the world is watching." Silence followed. Not empty. Heavy with choice. From the bedroom came the sound of a book closing, then small footsteps approaching, hesitant. The boy stood in the doorway, looking between them. "Do I have to say goodbye?" he asked. The father closed his eyes. Something inside him shifted, not suddenly, not cleanly, but enough. He reached for the bag by the door and set it back down. "No," he said, "you don't." The woman did not smile. She did not move. She simply exhaled, as if releasing something she had been holding very still. The weight remained, but it no longer pressed only on one pair of shoulders. Staying did not feel like relief. It felt like responsibility accepted without ceremony. The bag remained by the door for another day, untouched, as if its presence alone might keep the decision honest. The father did not unpack it right away. He needed to know that staying was not an impulse, not a reaction softened by comfort. The boy noticed, of course. He noticed everything now. They walked to school together the next morning, their steps falling into an easy rhythm. The boy swung his backpack once, testing the air. "You didn't leave," he said, not as a question. "No," the father replied. The boy nodded, absorbing that. He did not ask why. He did not ask how long. He accepted the answer as it was given. The review process continued, quietly and without drama. Meetings were held. Notes were taken. The father answered questions plainly, without rehearsed confidence. The woman attended when invited, her presence calm but unmistakable. She spoke when necessary and remained silent when it was not. What mattered most was not said aloud. It was seen. The boy spoke freely during evaluations. He did not flinch when adults addressed him directly. When asked where he felt safest, he did not hesitate. At home, he said, no qualifiers, no explanation. The word home had expanded without anyone naming the change. One afternoon, weeks later, the father returned from work to find the woman in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, preparing food. The boy sat at the counter, recounting his day with unhurried confidence. She looked up when the father entered. "It went well," she said. He understood what she meant. Dinner that night was unremarkable. Soup, bread, quiet conversation. The boy cleared his own plate and asked if he could help with the dishes. He was given a towel and took the task seriously, drying each plate with care. Later, when the boy was asleep, the father finally unpacked the bag. He folded each item and placed it back where it belonged. The act felt ceremonial in a way he had not expected. He found her in the common room, seated with a folder open in her lap. She closed it when he approached. "I unpacked," he said. She nodded. "I saw." They stood there for a moment, neither rushing to fill the space. "I didn't stay because it was easier," he said finally. "I know," she replied. "I stayed because leaving would have taught him the wrong lesson." She considered that. And what lesson was that? "That safety is temporary," he said. "That stability disappears the moment it's questioned." She set the folder aside. "You chose to teach him something else." "Yes." She stepped closer, not invading, just present. "You taught him that safety can be defended." The words settled between them. He looked at her, then, not as a figure of authority, not as a benefactor, but as a woman who had stood still while others weighed risk. He saw the cost in her restraint, in the way she had offered support without claiming credit. "I don't know what this is," he said quietly. She did not look away. "Neither do I. But I know what it isn't." She waited. "It isn't something I want to lose." Her expression changed then, subtly, not softened, clarified. "Good," she said. "Neither do I." They did not touch. They did not move closer than necessary. The understanding did not require it. In the days that followed, life resumed its gentle forward motion. The boy began bringing friends home from school. He laughed freely, argued mildly, complained about homework with dramatic sighs that made both adults exchange glances. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, the boy leaned against his father, feet tucked beneath him. "This is my favorite place," he said, eyes fixed on the book in his hands. The father glanced at the woman. She met his gaze, then looked back at the boy. "It's mine too," she said. The boy smiled, satisfied. Later that night, after the lights were out and the apartment settled into its familiar quiet, the father stood by the window. The city stretched beyond it, vast and indifferent. For the first time in a long while, he did not feel small beneath it. She joined him, standing close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "You stayed," she said softly. "Yes." "And you're still here?" "Yes." She turned toward him then. "So am I." The words were not a promise. They did not need to be. They were simply true. The morning light came in gently, filtered through curtains that had been washed too many times to keep their color. It settled on the floor in pale rectangles, warming the space without asking anything of it. The apartment was quiet in the way homes became quiet, not empty, but resting. The boy woke first. He padded down the hallway, carrying his blanket behind him like an afterthought. He climbed onto the couch and curled into the corner, watching the light move. When the woman emerged from the kitchen with 2 mugs and a small glass of juice, he looked up and smiled without hesitation. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied, setting the glass within his reach. The father appeared a few moments later, already dressed, keys in hand. He paused when he saw them there together. the scene so ordinary it nearly went unnoticed. Breakfast unfolded without ritual. Toast shared. Pages turned. The boy talked about a project at school he was proud of, something he had built with his hands. They listened. They asked questions. He answered with confidence, no longer searching their faces for approval. Later, as the day moved on, there were errands to run and small tasks to complete. The woman left briefly, returning without announcement. The father fixed a loose hinge on the cabinet. The boy sprawled on the floor, absorbed in a puzzle that no longer frustrated him. Nothing dramatic occurred. No declarations were made. And yet, everything had changed. In the afternoon, they walked together to the nearby park. The boy ran ahead, stopping occasionally to make sure they were still following. He climbed the low structure with practiced ease, calling down observations about the world from his elevated place. The adults sat on a bench, close enough that their arms brushed when they shifted. "This feels," the father began, then stopped. "Finished," she offered. "No," he said. "Held." She nodded. "Held." She nodded. "That's better." When it was time to leave, the boy came willingly, slipping his hand into his father's without being asked. He leaned briefly into the woman's side, not clinging, just acknowledging. That evening, as the day closed in on itself, the boy fell asleep on the couch, his book resting open on his chest. The father covered him gently, careful not to wake him. The woman dimmed the lights. They stood together, watching him sleep. "He's safe," the father said quietly. "Yes," she replied. "He knows it now." "And you?" he asked. She met his gaze. "I am too." They moved him to bed together, each step familiar, practiced. When the door was closed, they returned to the living room and sat without speaking. Outside, the city continued. Inside, the space held. Not because of ownership, not because of promise, but because they had chosen, each day, to remain.